Hello everybody, Xander here, and today we are going to be, doing a review of Barry. Apologies for neglecting, the reviews for the last 4 episodes. I have been pretty busy in most cases and haven't had time to watch it, which is why I wasn't able to get to, single episode reviews as they came out. So what I'm going to do is review all the last 4 episodes of Barry Season 4. And another apology because I normally don't script some of these reviews, at least for the TV ones. So, because it's 4 episodes, even though I saw all the episodes back to back recently, yesterday, things are still a little bit fuzzy from which moment happened in which of the 4 episodes. So I'm just going to try to mention things as I remember them and as I'm very sure this is the order the events happened in. So I'll try my best with that. Thank you for your patience, and let's get to it. In episode 5, we time jump 8 years later as Barry and Sally have run away together and have raised their own son, John, in a rural part of the United States under new names, and have tried, their very best to make sure no one knows that they are, in fact, Barry Berkman and Sally Reed. Barry stays home with John while Sally works at a diner outside of town, like far into the nearby town, where she wears a wig to try and remain hidden, at least by a bit. And throughout the episode we see that Barry teaches himself and his son about Abraham Lincoln as some sort of bit, I guess, watching all kinds of YouTube videos on Abraham Lincoln and also making fun of certain types of history videos on YouTube a bit. And we see that things are still not too great for either of them, as Barry is trying his best to keep this family together, even though it'll never be too great with them being on the run, and Barry's mental state clearly still not too good, but neither is Sally's for the most part. On Gene Cousineau's side of things, he has returned to LA after 8 years of hiding due to the fact that he had shot his son by accident and, of course, ran away from guilt. What brought him back ended up being the fact that Warner Brothers is planning on making a movie based on his story and Barry's story. Initially, he wants to shut down the picture, as he thinks, or at least he says, that it disrespects Janice's memory and perpetuates Barry and gives him the attention he wants. But after a while, throughout this episode and the next, it's clear that he is once again drawn in to the idea of fame and fortune, as they start bringing up names of A-list celebrities that could be attached to it, like Daniel Day-Lewis playing him, and someone else like Mark Wahlberg playing Barry. So Gene becomes more soft on the idea, and even thinks about changing some details to make Barry seem more sympathetic, just so Mark Wahlberg will feel better about playing the part. On the other side of things, Fuchs is let out of prison after such a long time, and he's clearly not been too great in those last number of years, as he definitely seems very off behavior-wise, and he also has a lot of tattoos now, including, of course, a raven. He drives by with his, gain, basically, doing stuff, and even goes to a Starbucks stand-in coffee shop, and somehow is able to, use his invisible charisma to pick up some barista, and drive, and she drives with them, and eventually they all go to Hank's new business, as Hank used the money that he got from the sand business to start his own big company, and he even has a golden statue of Cristobal in the middle of the lobby, and also like history of the company, sort of little story and pictures on the wall. So Hank has been doing pretty well business-wise, but we'll see later that he's still shooken up by what happened to Cristobal. In exchange for his services, Hank gives Fuchs and his gang a nice big mansion in the, nice sunny California area with all the, vineyards and fields and stuff. Nice looking and all that. After arriving in LA, Barry goes to purchase a gun and ends up finding the easiest gun store to purchase from in California, which, I don't want to be mean, but sounds very unlikely. But they also kind of make, I guess, make a joke about how cigarette containers have pictures of damaged lawns that are like, these are the dangers, watch out, even though people will just buy them anyway. Same thing with guns, I guess, because the girl at the counter shows him a giant picture or a giant picture with a collage of different pictures of gunshot wounds, and Barry's just like, okay, and buys the gun. He then goes to Cousineau's house, or more specifically, he actually his son's house, because he assumes Jane will go there first if he's coming back. Gene does come back to his son's house to apologize, but it is kind of very awkward because he did shoot his son by accident, but still shot him. And we get a brief cameo from his grandson, who's now a teenager, and just kind of goes off to his room. Probably does not want to talk to Gene in any capacity. In the manor at night, Hank is having dinner with Fuchs and his gang, and Fuchs mentions that he's now married to the woman he met at the coffee shop, and he's now sort of adopted her daughter through this marriage, and he's very happy about it, even though he's also drunk, so he's just kind of being a little goofy, his usual self at points. But things do turn a bit tense when he starts mentioning that Hank killed Cristobal, which does not go too well, as Hank gets up in a rage and tells him that he has a day to leave, otherwise he's killing him and his people. Having a bad feeling about it, Sally decides to go to LA as well, bringing John with her, and telling him that they're going to go see an old friend and that they'll be back with Dad soon enough. And she does exactly that, trying to find Mr. Cousineau, but not finding him at all, because he is trying to get a deal going with the movie now that he feels it would be a good idea. Spotting a cop outside of his cop car, Sally sees an opportunity to get his attention and tell him about what's going on. but she starts having almost a mental breakdown of sorts when she envisions him with a bloody, bleeding eye, and she just kind of stops and, is like, never mind. But as soon as she turns around, we see that Cristobal's men have, rolled up in a van and have taken John and are about to take Sally, and that's where that scene ends. Later, Hank has a meeting with all of these, Navy SEAL, ex-Marine type guys to, kill Fuchs and the gang he has, set up and all that. And a while later, a handful of boxes are shipped to Hank, and the guys he hired aren't, back with any word. And as a little, visual joke, before, anything's even revealed, the bottoms of the boxes are soaked in blood. And they're just like, maybe it's something else. And then, of course, they open the boxes, and they're full of the heads of, the guys they hired. After that, we cut to Fuchs and his gang, and he's, consulting his, or, well, not consulting, like, talking to his wife and daughter, telling them, hey, sorry for traumatizing you by killing those guys basically in front of you. And then he starts having a comedic, argument with his guys, saying that, maybe they should put on a loud movie to distract them. And then they're just like, what movie is loud enough to, mask guys getting their heads cut off? And then they start talking about the Fast and the Furious movies, because I guess those are just the loudest movies you'll ever watch. We cut outside of the mansion, where Hank has decided to go with Plan B, which is to shoot a rocket via a sort of ground level mortar system, I believe. And the rocket just completely misses the house by a lot of feet. And then they just start getting shot at. They get in their car, drive away. The car kind of gets damaged. They stop in the car. The one guy with Hank gets shot, and Hank, jumps off of a hill and starts tumbling and making, pain sounds while we're, still just looking out at the beautiful California field. In some sort of room, we see Sally and her son tied up in chairs, after being kidnapped and all that, and trying to figure out where they are. And some guys open the door, and Hank comes out and tells them that he's, using them as bait to get Barry, and possibly use him as bait for Fuchs to kill him. So, it's kind of a 50-50 shot whether or not, either of them are dead or Sally is dead. We then see that Barry, after trying to kill Kusno, waiting for him and all that, has been kidnapped by Janet Moss's dad and put through some sort of sensory deprivation, torture almost, for a bit, as his eyes are covered and he's got headphones over his head, and he's, crying, seeing different images significant to him, like his son and Mr. Kusno. Shannon Moss's dad decides to leave and just kind of let him sit there and feel whatever pain he wants him to feel for a while. After a bit, Barry is able to break free from his restraints and kind of check his surroundings, which is not much because it's just a garage. But he's able to pick up a knife from a little tray full of what seems to be, Moss's torture weapons or something like that. And he's able to pick the lock that's leading into the rest of the house with the knife, but ends up also cutting his hand. He makes it into the house, more specifically the kitchen, and sort of peeks around looking to see where Moss might be. And he also grabs some paper towels to, press against his wound so he doesn't bleed as much. But he ends up, passing out either way. But he does wake up hours later to his phone ringing, which was left on the counter by Moss. He answers it, and it's, FaceTime, actually, because, that's how Apple devices work, more so. And it's Hank, who, shows to him that he's got his family captured, and that he's going to kill them if he doesn't show up in, a few minutes, an hour maybe. So of course Barry goes back to the gun store and picks up a bunch of rifles and just has them strapped to himself, and he even gets in the car with them still on him, which was probably very uncomfortable. After that, Hank FaceTimes Fuchs and is able to get his attention by showing that he kidnapped Barry's family. And when Fuchs sees that Barry now has a son, something kind of stirs in him, and he says that he'll be right there. Meanwhile, John is asking his mother why, she calls him Barry, and why he called her Sally at one point, and what overall is going on. And she tells him the truth, that they are fugitives, and that both she and Barry killed people, and says that they are both bad people, but John is not. And she tearfully hugs him, saying that he's a good person and that it'll be alright. One of Hank's men then takes Sally out of the room, leaving John in there to see Hank while the big meeting is about to commence. After a bit, Fuchs and his gang finally turn up and have their meeting with Hank, waiting for Barry. Of course, Fuchs is not too jazzed about Barry not being there already, and demands that he sees John, otherwise he walks away. So Hank orders one of his guys to bring John over, and Fuchs kind of just looks at him for a bit, and things kind of get tense already with not much happening. And as this goes on, everyone starts shooting everybody, and John and Sally are able to get out of the line of fire, as well as Fuchs, but both Hank and his men are also shot, along with some of Fuchs's men. There's also a grenade that's thrown at one point, but it kind of just blows people away and not blowing them apart. But there's a lot of dead people, but also a lot of groaning, barely alive people. Fuchs is able to get up and kind of take John away to safety, telling him not to look at the dead people, while Sally's just kind of crawling around and trying to find John. I guess she might be in some form of shock or mental break, I'm not too sure. But on top of this and all of the barely alive people crawling around, we see Hank is, bleeding out from a shot to the chest next to Cristobal's statue, and he looks up at his face and grabs his outward reaching hand and says nothing, but is clearly kind of in pain from dying and all that. And after a bit, he finally does die, holding Cristobal's hand. Outside of Hank's building, Fuchs and John get out and end up coming across Barry, who's finally made it. And, John comes to hug Barry, happy to see him. And Barry and Fuchs just simply look at each other, and Fuchs just walks away. Previously, we also saw that, Kusno was trying to, get that deal going around with the movie, and thinks that he's getting to have a meeting with Mark Wahlberg at his apartment or whatever. But when he gets there, he finds that the guy who he was talking to about the movie is there, along with Janet Moss's dad and some police officers. And now he knows that he's screwed. And on top of that, he also is told that there's a theory now going around with all of the evidence that they've now found or put together that Kusno was behind Janet's murder. And he's not quite arrested yet, but it's not going well. Not going well at all. Meanwhile, while laying on a hotel bed with John, Sally whispers to Barry, asking him to, turn himself in because it's, the right thing to do, and that it's gone on way too long. But Barry, having, this new religious calling since, leaving with Sally to, rural America, says that God has, justified what he's doing, or what he tried to do to Kusno, and that everything's going to be okay. So in the next morning, when Barry wakes up, he finds that Sally and John are gone, and tries to look for them, and remembers that Sally was going to find Kusno, and assumes that she's gone to him for help. So Barry goes to Gene's place and tries to kill him, but ends up coming across like his sort of buddy or agent, something like that. And he tries to tell Barry that Sally and John haven't been here, but Barry's swearing that they were. But as soon as the argument gets to its point, Kusno gets out of his bedroom, as he was not feeling great, and locked himself in there. Comes out with the prop gun that was given to him and shoots Barry in the chest. And Barry simply says, "Oh wow," just as Kusno puts a bullet through Barry's skull. We then fade to black and hear an audience clapping, and then see the audience themselves, but also see the backs of performers for a clearly different show than what you almost think it would be, like a production of Barry's life. But it's not just some standard play. And we see that Sally is there, clearly the sort of director almost. And we also see that John is there too. And we cut outside as Sally is exiting the school where this play had taken place, and is getting compliments from people, and even asked to have a drink with some guy, but she declines and goes to her car and talks to John for a bit. And when he asks if he can hang out with a friend, she says sure, and gets in her car and drives away. We then see, as John goes to his friend's house, that his friend's been trying to get him to watch this movie that was made of his dad's life. So the movie did get made, but just a little bit different. So he asks John if he's sure, and he says yes. And then they watch the movie, which is of course, very exaggerated, over-the-top rendition of Barry's life in a Hollywood movie type of way, with both Cousineau and Barry obviously not being played by Daniel Day-Lewis or Mark Wahlberg, but instead some just random guys. And it just becomes very melodramatic and humorous to us, at least. But as soon as the credits close, we see that John kind of has some sort of smile on his face, almost one that seems kind of passionate or something like that. It doesn't seem pitiful or sarcastic. And that's where Barry ends. And that was season 4 of Barry, and also the series finale. This was the final season, and it was an interesting note to end on. I'm guessing they kind of wanted it to be a bit open-ended as to what John's actual reaction was to the movie based on his dad, whether he actually believed the lie that was kind of set up by it, that Barry was more so the unwilling puppet of Gene Cousineau, or what. But either way, it's an interesting note to end on, and I'll give it that. It doesn't seem like it's cheating us much. It doesn't seem out of character for anything. It seems almost just right. I've mostly said and thought this throughout the whole series, especially after season 3, but this show really doesn't have any really good guy characters outside of maybe John, but we only see him for a handful of episodes for this final season, and we've spent way more time with everyone else, and almost everyone else in this series has been mostly selfish or just horrible. Even Hank, who was seemingly an innocent, or at least sweet, sort of mobster, ended up falling into more darkness than he thought he would, and allowed Cristobal to die. And then of course Barry killed lots of people thinking that he was justified and that he was doing something good. And then Cousineau, who also seemed like he was going to be a decent person, fell to the greed and fortune, the fame and fortune that he sought long ago and feels that he can finally get, even at the cost of his integrity. And Sally, you could say, is the closest thing to a morally decent character next to Hank, but even she still has moments of selfishness, malice, and all these other things. There's just not many good people, and I think that's kind kind of an interesting thing to set up, even if, you know, it's been done before, but you almost don't expect it with a show that's, you know, starting with a hitman who just wants to be human, almost, to be an actor, to be somebody, and he eventually falls down into a wretched, broken man who dies getting exactly what he deserved, even though he ended up being immortalized, just like Gene seemingly didn't want, but allowed to happen, especially by shooting Barry, which is definitely the sad thing now that I think about it. In some ways, Barry won just by a little bit, and maybe even won over his son and possibly others through the sympathetic portrayal of him via that movie. But who knows what actually happened. The performances, as usual, were really good. I still, you know, felt some sympathy and some pity for a lot of these characters, even though they were often doing horrible things. Especially, you know, Sally and Hank, who fell from grace often, and only one of them had some modicum of a happy ending, but who knows how far that one went. Because I watched these all at once, and it's a little hard to, you know, measure each one, I'm going to give all of these episodes of Barry a 9 out of 10, and I'm going to do the same for season 4 as a whole, a 9 out of 10. I hope you enjoyed this final review for Barry and for Barry season 4. I also hope that maybe you can like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more reviews or just more videos. I'll see you next time, and take care.